Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. Here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
All right, welcome back to, Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and I forgot what the show's name was for a second there, Dave. But today we're talking about, the most famous allegory in the history of philosophy? What is that? And maybe expand upon that. What's going on here?
I'm curious, Keith. Good morning, by the way. Great to be with you. And I was listening on the way driving in, and you said, "Oh, it's been a while since I've learned this one." Did you actually learn? It's called the Allegory of the Cave. It's by Plato, the great Greek philosopher. Did you ever learn this in college?
I don't.
Or anywhere?
I think it might have been high school. All I remember is that there's a cave in shadows, and there's people behind that. That's pretty much the extent that I remember.
Well, that's a good start. Yeah, that's more than I learned when I was in college, because I was in my 30s before I was exposed to this. And when I first learned about it, and there's so many layers, and I know we don't have very much time during this segment, but we'll be talking more about it on Back to the Father on Friday at 1 o'clock Central. So if it's okay, Keith, I'll go ahead and explain what the allegory of the cave is, and then we can talk about some of the implications and why a Catholic Christian in the 21st century should care about the allegory of the cave. First of all, Plato lived hundreds of years before Christ. He was born in 429 BC, died in 347 BC. He was the student of Socrates and the teacher of Aristotle. So he was placed very well historically in the history of philosophy. So the allegory of the cave is basically, there is a cave, and an allegory is a story that uses symbols or imagery to make a point. But in the cave, you have these prisoners, and they are chained down, okay? And they're chained at the neck and also in the body, so they can't turn their head, they cannot move, they just have to look straight ahead, and they're looking at a wall. And on the wall, there is a projection of shadows, because behind them, there's a fire that's projecting the shadows. And you also have these puppet masters that are walking with these images on a stick, and that's what's being imposed on the wall. So basically the premise is that these people are only getting part of the truth, okay? They're seeing shadows, but that's all they see, so this is their entire reality. Well, the plot thickens because one of the prisoners escapes from his chains, and he gets out of the chains, he gets away from the wall, he turns around, he sees the puppet masters, he sees the fire, and all of a sudden he is beginning this process of enlightenment. He realizes that what he was seeing was not all of reality. And then he manages to get all the way out of the cave, and he goes outside where the sun and real things are. And at first, he's blinded by the sun, so he covers his eyes, and it takes him a little while to adjust to reality. But once he sees it, he's enlightened, he sees the truth. The sun represents, of course, in the Christian perspective, God and all truth. But then he wants to go back in the cave because he wants to go back to the prisoners who are still chained and tell them the reality of what he now knows. But when he goes in, of course, he's now blinded again because it's all dark in there, and he has to adjust to the new reality. And he goes to the prisoners, and he tries to tell them that he has now been enlightened. He knows the truth. They are only looking at shadows, and they think he's crazy. And they actually want to kill him because they prefer the shadows rather than the truth. And this is also, I think, symbolic of Socrates, Plato's teacher, because he, of course, was killed by the Athenian leaders. And so, but, one thing we can talk about is I think a lot of people listening right now went from darkness into light. They saw the truth. They learned the truth, perhaps through Catholic radio, of our faith, and they go back to their family members and they're like, I want to teach you. And as we all know, sometimes people are not open to the truth, and they in fact they may ridicule us, and they may. So that's one of the applications. There's a lot more, but that's the allegory of the cave in a nutshell.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot missing from my my memory there. So thank you for explaining that.
You had the basics. You had the basics.
The real basics, the cave and just people and shadows. So you touched a little bit on some of the elements like the sun, but what would you say is the significance of this to our Christian faith?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. I think, first of all, it's interesting that these prisoners are watching a projection on the wall. Something is being projected onto the wall. And I think, and I've seen some commentators say, okay, does this represent television, modern day, things that we're looking on our screen, things that are projected by us? We've got the puppet masters who are, they're being very deceiving, right? Because they know the guys are chained. They know they're projecting something on the wall. And so I've heard people say, okay, what lies are we being fed? I was listening to Debbie and Adam talked a lot about misinformation, about deception, whether it's about the aliens or about anything else. The advertising we see on television and on the computer, we're constantly being fed lies. And so the crux of the allegory of the cave, and I think what Plato was really trying to get at, is trying to find the truth. Because we see things, we perceive things with our senses, but is that the entire truth? Now, not to get too deep, but Plato had this realm of forms, and he made a distinction between the things that we could see with our senses and perceive with our senses, and then the reality was in a whole different realm. That's very philosophical, but the truth is he's what's called a realist, and he believed that there was reality out there that could be sought. And interestingly, a lot of philosophers these days are not realists. They don't believe that that we can ever know the truth. And of course, that applies very much to our Catholic faith, because we believe not only can we know the truth, but the truth is a person. The truth is Jesus Christ. And we can consume the truth, Jesus Christ, every time we go to Mass, and we can come to know him better through, education and listening to Catholic radio and things like that. So that's another layer to it. But there's a lot going on in this allegory.
Yeah, no kidding. And just the mention, there's not a lot of realists out there. What impact would you say this allegory has with regards to someone who's looking into becoming a philosopher or future philosophers for today?
Yeah, I think a couple of things is that, the philosophy is literally the love of wisdom, right? The philosophy implies the things that we can come to know through the light of human reason. That we don't need divine help or an outpouring of God's grace, okay? But that's only part of the story, because a philosophy only gets us so far. What we really want is to know the ultimate truth, and that really comes through divine revelation. Like, philosophy is not going to teach us about the Blessed Trinity or angels or the reality of heaven, hell, and purgatory. Okay, that's theology. And so the philosophy kind of sets the table so that our minds can kind of come to decipher falsehood to truth, and then we start to understand the truths of our faith, and that philosophy goes into like overdrive, and all of a sudden the real meaning and purpose of life, which is supernatural, is a little bit easier to understand once you have a philosophical background and basis. And as I mentioned before, I think there's a lot of people that have that, and I've been there, that you finally come to know the truth, and you want everybody in the world to know it. And sometimes we can be a little overbearing. I know I did. I know I annoyed a lot of my family members back when I first became exposed to the truths of the Catholic faith. You want to teach everybody, and sometimes you're a little disheartened because they don't necessarily want to know it, especially converts, I think, have that experience. I see Tim nodding. But so that's another one of the applications. And Keith, did you ever see the movie The Matrix?
Oh yeah, definitely.
With Keanu Reeves. You must have been a toddler at the time that came out in 1999. I mean, no, you're older than that. But that movie was based on the Allegory of the Cave with Keanu Reeves. That loosely had to do with a guy searching for the truth. Yeah. And also at the end, if you remember, he went back and he kind of enlightened people with the truth that he had come. In that case, they were thankful for his, opening them up to the light and enlightening them. But in the Allegory of the Cave, that's not the case.
Yeah. So, I mean, thank you, by the way, for breaking this allegory down, making it easier for us to understand, especially if we haven't heard it in a very long time. But But why should like myself or another average person care about this allegory of the cave?
Well, I'd say principally because we're all seekers of the truth, right? And we want the truth. The truth is Jesus Christ. The truth is God. We should always be, seekers. And, all of us, the people that are tuning into Catholic radio right now, you're doing it because you're seeking the truth. I think that's one of the things that would be common to everybody listening to Catholic radio. That's why we go to Bible studies. That's why we, have great conversations. We pay attention to our priests when they give great homilies on Sundays, is that we seek the truth. And I think that's kind of ingrained into us. And so when you read the Allegory of the Cave, you realize that it is ultimately about separating falsehood from the truth. And it kind of plays into the very nature of the human person to naturally want to not fall into falsehood and come to know the truth. And so I think that's, it's common among all of humanity. And so I think that's why 2,400 years later, people are still talking about the Allegory of the Cave, because I think it's still applicable from a philosophical and also a theological standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Random question. Do you think Plato's philosophy is the pagan that came closest to the truth of Christianity?
I would say Aristotle probably came closer. Augustine was a big fan of Plato. Thomas Aquinas was much more drawn to Aristotle. I think, for reasons we can maybe talk about in another segment, because I know we're about to run out of time, I think Aristotle got it better and was closer. But, of course, Plato was his teacher, and so Aristotle has a lot to, he appreciates his mentor and teacher, Plato. But I would say of the pagans, Aristotle may have gotten it a little bit better, in my opinion.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dave, Mr. Palmer, for joining us, getting our philosophy on with Thinking Out Loud. Appreciate you every single Tuesday here. We can also find you on Back to the Father, and that's Fridays at 1 p.m. Central on GRN Online YouTube. So catch you on Friday as well. But thank you, Dave.
All right. Thanks so much. We're going to have a special guest on Friday at 1 o'clock, okay? We'll introduce you to him at that time. So thanks, Keith. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate being on.
Likewise. Absolutely. Well, hey, it's the end of our first hour. There's still a lot coming up, so stay tuned. There is way more coming. You can continue to stream us if maybe you're getting out of your car, you're getting to the office. Stream us from YouTube, Rumble, I think even our mobile app. So stay tuned. We'll see you on the other side of this break. See ya.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.